I spent my life trying to earn my family's love, only to find out they were grooming me as a spare parts donor. After an accident as a kid, I became the scapegoat they barely tolerated. At 17, I discovered a file that changed everything. My consent was already filled out. When I confronted them, they called it paying my debt. I ran, and they came crawling back. Only when they needed my body to save my brother. They say blood is thicker than water, but no one ever talks about how quickly blood can turn cold, or how family can smile while planning to carve pieces of your body away to save themselves. My name is Rowan Maddox. I am 18 now, but sometimes it feels like I have lived 100 lives in the cracks of this family. I have never really told anyone this story. Maybe because a part of me was always afraid that saying it out loud would make it too real. Maybe because deep down I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, it would stop hurting. But it never did. And now, after everything, I think it is time. I grew up knowing I was different. Not because anyone told me directly. Not at first. But because love, when rationed carefully, makes its absence louder than any words ever could. It was not just in the missed smiles or the hurried conversations. It was in the way my father's hand lingered a little longer on Cassian's shoulder, in the way Lorelai's eyes sparkled when Lyra entered the room but dulled when she looked at me. It was in the way my achievements were met with polite nods, while theirs were celebrated with family dinners and proud speeches. Our house looked normal enough from the outside. A wide porch with white railings, a neatly trimmed lawn, a swing set in the backyard that creaked when the wind blew. But inside it was a quiet battlefield, all smiles for the neighbors, and cold wars within the walls. Griffin Maddox, my father, was a man carved from duty, a figure people admired from afar, but who kept his affection locked away like a precious heirloom, meant only for the chosen few. Lorelai, my stepmother, was the queen of appearances, her world a curated collection of charity events, social teas, and orchestrated Christmas cards. Cassian and Lyra were the rightful heirs to that world. They knew how to navigate it with polished smiles and effortless charm. They were the golden children, the ones who carried the Maddox name with pride and purpose. And then there was me, the one who smiled too shyly, laughed too awkwardly, dreamed too differently. The one who was never quite enough, no matter how hard he tried. The one who, through a twist of fate and a cruel accident, became the silent scapegoat for everything that went wrong. When I was 3 years old, I caused the accident. The accident when I was 3 years old sealed my fate in this family. After that, I was no longer just different. I was a reminder of what was lost, of what could never be fixed, of what should have been perfect, but was now forever flawed. I remember it vividly, even though everyone assumed I was too young to hold on to the memory. I had been playing at the top of the staircase, chasing after a toy car that slipped from my grasp. Lyra, trying to grab me before I tumbled down, lost her balance instead. The world blurred into a swirl of screams, pounding footsteps, and the sickening sound of bone against hardwood. She survived. She healed, mostly. But she would never run quite the same again, and I became the boy who broke their beautiful daughter. After the accident, the atmosphere in the Maddox household shifted. Griffin stopped ruffling my hair absent-mindedly. Lorelai's smiles, already thin, vanished altogether. Cassian, once indifferent, grew cold, his teasing turning sharp and cutting. Suddenly, every small mistake I made became a catastrophe. A spilled glass of milk was met with tight-lipped glares and hours of cold silence. A forgotten homework assignment was treated like a betrayal. If I excelled in school, it was met with indifference. If I struggled, it was proof that I was a burden they had been forced to carry. Holidays became ceremonies of exclusion. I was given token gifts, plain socks, a calendar, while Cassian and Lyra unwrapped phones, jewelry, and expensive clothes. Family photos were taken without me unless I happened to be in the background, blending into the wallpaper like a piece of unwanted furniture. At family dinners, I was expected to clear the plates, while my siblings laughed and basked in praise. Conversations flowed around me, never toward me. If I tried to join, I would be met with curt nods or pointed silence, the kind that made my skin crawl and my throat close up. School events were worse. Griffin and Lorelai would show up beaming for Cassian's debate victories or Lyra's piano recitals, but when I won a science fair or a writing contest, They barely managed a thin smile and a distracted "good job, buddy" before turning their attention elsewhere. Once during an award ceremony, I scanned the audience searching for their faces and found only empty seats. I learned to live in the shadows, to find small scraps of joy where I could. In the library, books I devoured late at night. In the quiet moments spent fixing broken things in the garage, teaching myself how to mend what others discarded. In the rare fleeting smiles Sutton Clark gave me across crowded hallways, before she became the light I clung to when everything else grew too dark. Sutton Clark had the kind of presence you noticed even if you tried not to. There was something careless about her, not in a cruel way, but like she had decided a long time ago not to let the world tell her who to be. Mismatched socks, ink stains on her fingers, a half smirk when teachers barked orders she didn't care to follow. To everyone else, she was just another restless teenager. To me, she was proof that maybe life could be bigger than survival. We weren't friends back then, not really. But even in the small moments, a glance, a grin, a soft hey in a hallway crowded with noise, Sutton made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Her family never hit me. They never shouted. They simply withdrew, carving out a space where I could exist without ever truly belonging. In the Maddox house, love was a transaction, and I never had enough to trade. And so I existed. A quiet echo in a house that only heard applause for others, until the day they took us all to the hospital for a family health checkup. It seemed innocent enough. Griffin and Lorelei made it sound like a routine thing, something responsible families did. Preventive care. They said, just a little blood work, a few tests, no big deal. I was 15. I remember sitting in the sterile, bright waiting room, swinging my legs nervously against the plastic chair. Lyra and Cassian chatted easily, scrolling through their phones, unconcerned. Lorelei filled out paperwork with quick practice strokes. Griffin read a magazine, his face unreadable. When they called my name, Lorelei smiled too brightly. "Go on, sweetheart. It won't hurt." And it did not really. Just a prick, a draw of blood, a polite nurse with a kind voice, telling me I was doing great. I walked back to the waiting area afterward, a cotton ball taped to the inside of my elbow, feeling a little foolish for being nervous. I thought nothing of it at the time. We went out for ice cream afterward, and for a brief moment it felt almost like a normal family outing. Griffin even ruffled my hair again, just for a second, just long enough to make my chest ache with hope. But it was not about preventive care. It was about insurance, about certainty, about making sure that if the unthinkable happened, if Cassian's health ever faltered, they would have a backup plan. They just needed to know if I could be carved apart to save him. I did not know that yet. Not until the day I found the file. Not until the day everything finally made a terrible sense. It was by chance. I was searching for a charger in Griffin's office, a place that always smelled faintly of leather, printer ink, and something colder, harder to name. I shouldn't have been in there. Even as I rifled through the drawers, my heart hammered against my ribs, like it knew I was trespassing into territory not meant for me. I opened the wrong drawer. It stuck for a second, like it didn't want to be opened, and then jerked free with a reluctant creak. Inside was a plain manila folder, tucked neatly between dusty tax files and warranty papers. The label stood out immediately, blocky, clinical, almost aggressive, in its precision. Donor match testing. Curiosity prickled at me. Something about the way it was hidden but not hidden made my stomach knot. I reached for it without thinking, my fingers almost trembling. When I slid the papers out and saw my name printed neatly across the top of the first page, it was like the world shifted sideways. For a moment, I just stared. Maybe if I stared long enough, it would rearrange itself into something harmless. Maybe it would say routine health screening, or school vaccinations, or anything else that made sense. It didn't. Instead, it unfolded into a quiet horror. Blood work results. Tissue compatibility charts. HLA markers cross-referenced with another name, Cassian Maddox. There were notes scribbled in the margins in Griffin's tight, impatient handwriting, clinical, detached, perfect match. The words seared into my brain like a brand. I kept flipping faster now, the edges of the paper biting into my fingertips. Cassian's diagnosis came next, chronic kidney disease, stage 4, the grim prognosis spelled out in cold medical terms. There were charts and deadlines, Notes of urgency stamped across pages like blood smears. And then, at the end, a final sheet. A consent form. My name was typed at the top in the same neat font, already slotted into the spaces where a donor's identity would go. But the signature line, the place where I should have signed, where I should have agreed, was left blank, waiting. No one had ever asked me. No one had even planned to ask. My mouth went dry. The walls of the office seemed to close in around me, the stale air turning heavier, thicker. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to steady myself, but the ground felt unsteady, like it might crack open beneath me at any second. And somewhere deep inside, somewhere colder than bone, colder than marrow, a realization clicked into place. They never loved you for you. You were a backup plan, a spare part they'd been cultivating all along. Not a son, not a brother, just a collection of useful organs, packaged neatly in a body they could pretend to care about. The folder slipped from my hands and hit the carpet with a soft thud. I just stood there staring at it, as if the papers might crawl back into the drawer and take the truth with them. But the damage was done. The truth was out, and it settled into my bones like winter cold, sharp and endless. When I confronted them, there was no apology, no shame, no hesitation. I burst into the living room, the folder clutched in my hands like a weapon. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might tear straight through my ribs. They were all there, like they had been waiting for me. Griffin turned from the fireplace, where he was nursing a glass of whiskey. Lorelei was perched on the couch, legs crossed, the very picture of patience. Cassian slouched in the corner, eyes glued to his phone, refusing to meet my gaze. I threw the folder down onto the coffee table. The pages fanned out, the words screaming louder than I ever could. What is this? My voice cracked, high and raw. Tell me what the hell this is. Griffin didn't flinch. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. Instead, he crossed his arms over his chest, his expression settling into that familiar, infuriating mask of disappointment. You owe this family, he said, like it was obvious, like it was fact, like it was fair. The room seemed to tilt. I actually staggered a step back, blinking, trying to understand how he could say it so casually. Oh, you. My voice rose, ugly and desperate. You think I owe you my body? My life? Lorelei sniffled dramatically, dabbing at eyes that were perfectly dry. It's the least you can do, she said, her voice trembling with false emotion. After everything you've taken from us. Everything I choked on the words, on the sheer audacity of it. I was 3 years old. It was an accident. Lorelei's mouth twisted into something almost cruel. You ruined Lyra's life. You ruined our life. Her voice was sharp now, brittle. You should be grateful we kept you at all. Griffin nodded solemnly, like she had spoken some great truth. Asking you to help your brother, he said, is the least you can do to repay the debt you owe. Debt. That word hit harder than any slap could have. Cassian shifted in the corner, but still wouldn't meet my eyes. Wouldn't say a damn word. Cassian, I said, my voice cracking. Say something. Please. But he just hunched lower into his jacket, like maybe if he made himself small enough, he could pretend none of this was happening. The silence from him hurt more than anything Lorelei or Griffin could have said. In that moment, something inside me cracked. Something raw and tender that I had been clinging to all these years without even realizing it. The hope that maybe, deep down, they loved me. The hope that maybe, if I was good enough, careful enough, quiet enough, they would see me. But they hadn't. They never had, and they never would. I was 17 years old, barely more than a boy, and I finally understood. In their eyes, I wasn't Rowan. I wasn't a son. I wasn't a brother. I was spare parts. A living insurance policy they had been grooming for this very moment. You don't want a family, I said, my voice shaking, my vision blurring. You want a goddamn organ donor. Griffin's jaw tightened. Don't be dramatic, he snapped. You're being selfish. Cassian is dying. I let out a harsh, broken laugh. Good. Maybe now he'll finally know what it feels like to be disposable. Lorelei gasped like I had slapped her. Griffin took a step forward, his face flushed with anger. But I didn't give him the chance to say anything else. I turned and ran. Out of the house. Down the front steps. Into the night, where the cold air hit me like a wall, and the stars overhead blurred into a smear of light. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I collapsed onto Sutton Clark's porch, sobbing so hard my whole body shook. It was Sutton and her family who helped me understand that love does not demand you carve pieces out of yourself to be worthy. That family is not the people who hold your existence as collateral. At first, living with them felt almost alien. I didn't know how to sit at a dinner table without flinching. I didn't know how to accept a second helping of food without hearing a voice in my head whisper, "You're taking too much." I didn't know how to trust that when someone laughed, it wasn't at my expense. The Clarks never made a big deal out of it. They never pushed or pried. They just made space for me. Quiet, steady, unwavering. Sutton's mom would leave extra blankets at the end of the couch, just in case. Her dad would ask if I wanted to help fix the old truck, handing me greasy tools and pretending not to notice when my hands shook. Sutton herself would sit next to me for hours, sometimes talking, sometimes just reading her book with her knee pressed lightly against mine, anchoring me back to the world. Slowly, I learned how to breathe again. I got a part-time job at the local hardware store. I applied to community college. I saved up for my own car. A beat-up old Corolla that rattled when it hit 40 miles an hour but was mine in a way nothing else had ever been. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to earn my right to exist. For the first time, I belonged. But peace, it turned out, was a fragile thing. The Maddoxes didn't let go easily. At first it was small things. A voicemail from Griffin, "Come home, let's talk like a family." A birthday card from Lorelei, all pristine cursive and empty words, tucked into my mailbox like a landmine. An email from Cassian, short, stiff, pretending we were still brothers, pretending he hadn't stayed silent when they tried to sell me off, piece by piece. I ignored them all. But when Cassian's condition worsened, when the reality of his failing kidneys became too grim to ignore, they escalated. They showed up at Sutton's porch, their faces hollowed by desperation and fear. Lorelei, once so proud, so polished, fell to her knees in the dirt like some tragic heroine from a play. Griffin's voice cracked when he spoke, raw and broken in a way that almost sounded real. Lyra clutched my hand, her fingers trembling, her nails bitten down to the quick. "Please," she whispered, so soft I almost didn't hear it. "He's your brother." I stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of 18 years pressed down on me. The boy who had learned to apologize for every breath. The boy who once believed that if he was small enough, obedient enough, they would find it in their hearts to love him. Inside me, two truths warred. One cold and bitter, you owe them nothing. One aching and raw, maybe saving him will finally set you free. I looked at Sutton standing behind me on the porch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, her eyes wide and brimming with tears she refused to let fall. She wasn't saying anything. She wasn't begging me to stay or go. She would stand by whatever choice I made, even if it broke her heart to watch me bleed again. And for the first time in my life, I realized that this terrible trembling moment was mine, not theirs. I closed my eyes. I opened my mouth to speak. The future, messy, heavy, and trembling, waited to hear my answer. But that, I think, is a story for another